This is Live Wild's Connection Matters podcast, bringing together heart-centred, nature-connected, curious people who share the inquiry. How can we create a connected and meaningful way of living that brings more health, happiness and growth to our world? My name is Leona Johnson and I am your host. This is episode 2. Well, hello beautiful humans. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Connection Matters podcast. I'm really excited about bringing a discussion about permaculture to you straight away because it's something that's inspired me so much throughout my life, and I feel like it really is one of the gifts that will lead us into a better future. If you don't know anything about permaculture, then this is a great podcast for you because we really talk about all of its fundamental ethics and a lot of what's already out there in terms of permaculture projects. And if you do know about permaculture, then I still think that there's a lot here that is of interest. Andy talks a lot about his early journey as a young seeker of something like permaculture and when he found it, and then the rise of permaculture and its growth, and then of course about the specific applications of permaculture and the many and varied ways that it could guide us into a better way of living. So it's a rich conversation right up until the very end. Listening to the end also really helps us with our ratings. We're a new podcast, and when people listen to the end and rate it, and especially when they leave reviews, it really helps people to know about us, and it pushes us further up in iTunes and in the other podcast providers. We'd love to keep this podcast going on an ongoing basis, and to support that, we have set up a Patreon account. Patreon is a way that people who like the podcast and want to support us can get access to bonus episodes and extra recordings and solo episodes from me sometimes, and sometimes we get giveaways from the guests. So if this sounds like something that you would be interested in, or if you'd just like to support us, then we'd be so grateful for you to help us in this ethical way of raising funds to make us sustainable. So without further ado, this is Andy Goldring. Hello, Andy Goldring. Thank you so much for joining me for Connection Matters podcast. It's really nice to have this chance to speak with you. It's been quite a long time. Yeah. I don't even know if you'll remember, but I did my first introduction to permaculture course about 15 or 16 years ago at the ATC in Hebden Bridge.
Oh, yes.
And that was, with you. And it was just a weekend. It was the old ATC on the canal. And that was my first sort of dive into what permaculture is, which intrigued me from the beginning. And then we did the Earth Activist training. So, which was 2.5 weeks, wasn't it, of really intense and amazing training around permaculture and activism and earth-based spirituality, which, what a combination. Exactly. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, it was intense for me as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're intense for teachers, but I felt like I was at the edge of my learning there as well. So
yeah, I
think my favourite learning quote is, learning is not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know something, then obviously there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And I felt like there was I learned a lot there.
Yes.
So I'm sure you did as well. It's great.
It was. And I'd love to talk a bit more about that maybe in a bit. Before we go into that, I'd love to just start with a bit of gratitude. I always like to start with gratitude at the beginning of these podcasts, and actually at the beginning of any meeting. That's my norm, just connecting on that positive level. What am I grateful for today? I am grateful today. I'm grateful for inspiration. I'm grateful for the early morning, actually, because that's often when I wake up and have my sort of most creative thoughts and ideas, and This morning I woke up and had some really creative thoughts about where I want to go with this podcast, and exciting responses to one of the interviews I did yesterday. So that's what I'm grateful for today.
Lovely, wonderful. So I can share my gratitude today. So I guess before I say what they are, I think I agree with you that we need to flex our gratitude muscles more often. Generally, I think it's really, really powerful and so good. I think we often compare ourselves to all the amazing things that other people are doing and all the big stuff, and make you feel a bit lowly. But I think we generally have a lot to be grateful for, and the more we appreciate it, the happier we are. So today I'm grateful for my parents, actually. They sent me a lovely gift today, which just reminds me how loved I am and how appreciated I am, completely unconditionally, without any, real judgment or barrier. And it's so wonderful to have people in your life that really do appreciate you for who you are, whatever you are. And my parents were an inspiration to me, and I guess helped me strive to be as non-judgmental and as loving for my children. So I'm very grateful to have very kind, loving parents. And I'm also very grateful for, similar to yours actually, about mine, I'd say was the kind of the sky. I live in the middle of a city, and for me, waking up in the morning, I can look out the windows and really the sky is wild. And, I'm very lucky. I live most of the way up a hill in Leeds, and I've got a big sky, and it is a wild space. And I really, over the last few years, I've been really appreciating the sky as a wild space. And what that does is it helps me to connect into nature, even though I'm in a very urban, built-up area. Actually, it's wild everywhere. So really appreciated the sky, and the particular blessing today was the fact that the sky sent me 2 goldfinches, and I only saw them very briefly. I've got a little kind of goldfinch bird food feeder in my garden with sort of nigella seeds, which is good for them. And I rarely see them, but I often see them flying away. So I saw them flying away today, and just that flash of colour. And they've got a very playful flight pattern. So they're some birds just go straight ahead, whereas goldfinches kind of go up and down and up and down and up and down. And it's like they're playing. It's almost like they kind of fly a bit like I imagine dolphins play in the water. They're kind of in the water and going up and down. And so that was really, really beautiful to see. So, they're mine for today, I think.
I will definitely join you with all of those gratitudes. I'm very lucky to have 2 very loving parents as well, who've always supported me unconditionally, which helps me strive to be that way with my children. And also the goldfinches, actually. My garden is very small, but I've got an apple tree. And it was last year, really, for the first time I saw goldfinches, and they come regularly. I try and put some seeds out for them, but my next door neighbour is fantastic. He must have 20 or 30 different bird feeding stations in a tiny little yard. And so I think he draws them in, and then they pop over to the apple tree, and we get to see quite a lot of them. Goldfinches and bullfinches as well, actually, which I've never seen bullfinches in the garden until this year. So yeah, it's quite exciting. Yes. Have that little bit of wildness right outside my window. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Lovely. And I used to think goldfinches actually were quite rare, but when I looked it up, actually, they are one of the birds that I think are rising in number.
They are. That's right.
Yeah. So that's nice. So I've already said that we met years ago, and you were a permaculture instructor, and I guess still are a permaculture instructor.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce yourself and just share a little bit more about what that is and what else it is that you do, or what that means,
Sure.
and why that is, why that keeps you feeling alive?
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Well, where to begin? I guess I was really lucky because I found what I was passionate about really early in my life. So, I could probably characterize my teenage years as sort of the no years, the years where I was rejecting lots of stuff. I think probably from like 2014 or something. I think not 2014, when I was 14 in 1984, there was the Bhopal disaster. And I think that was probably the item of the news which really kind of connected with me and made me realize just how unjust the world was. And, from there was kind of, we were all worried that we were going to get destroyed in a nuclear war. There was quite a lot of that in the 80s, and acid rain, beginnings of climate change, kind of read some stuff by Oxfam about inequality around the world and started to understand about the IMF and structural inequality and, all this terrible, terrible stuff. And I kind of rejected it, but I didn't know what I wanted. And it wasn't like I was searching for anything. It's just, I knew what I didn't want to do. And I kind of decided to make myself a bit unemployable. So I did a fine art degree and did sculpture, which was fantastic. But when I finished my course, I thought, well, really, I kind of love doing it. It's very creative, but I just couldn't see myself being a kind of famous artist. I think you need to do a lot of self-promotion, which I'm not really into. I don't really use social media much. I'm a bit quite private as a person. So I thought, well, I'll just keep an open space and sort of see what emerges. And I was just very lucky, and to cut a long story short, I went to London to see the director's cut of Blade Runner, and ended up meeting someone in a phone box who told me about permaculture.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was someone I recognised from a squat party in Farnborough from a few years before, and he was really tired, and I took him on this jet. So I said, come on, let's go and have a cup of coffee. Because it was kind of, I guess it was quite late at night, but I had to find somewhere to sleep so before I hitched back home the next day to leave. And so we were chatting and said, oh, you look really tired. Where have you been? And we've been to Denmark to an international permaculture convergence. I said, wow, well, what's permaculture and what's a convergence? So he started telling me about permaculture, and it was a bit like, when you get a present at Christmas and you're kind of unwrapping it, and even though you haven't completely unwrapped it, you've got this growing sense of excitement that you think it's just what you want. Mm. And then you get the first glimpse, it's, this is just what I've been looking for. Or, and it was such a sort of joyful feeling that first few months where I guess I'd come across something which connected my moral and ethical self. So I was brought up as a Christian. I'm not a practicing Christian now, but, I'm happy to learn from all the major religions, and certainly the kind of moral thinking of, love your neighbor and so on is all still good stuff. So the fact that permaculture has this explicit ethical framework of earth care, people care, fair shares spoke to me. It was founded on learning from nature and a deep appreciation for the natural world and a joy in the natural world and a kind of a yearning for more nature. That spoke to me. It's rooted very explicitly in an appreciation of indigenous people and ancient traditions and science and technology. Mm. And I thought, fantastic. Okay, so here's an ethical approach that really has got this deep yearning to work with nature, not against it, but respects all the good things from the past and the fantastic work and traditions of indigenous people, and is also using a kind of scientific and technological approach that can also help us to meet some of the challenges we've got. So just very exciting, really, that something put together those different strands. And then I guess I kind of fell in love with some of the diagrams. So, I when I'd hitched back to Leeds from London that night, the next day I went to Waterstones and ordered the Permaculture Designer's Manual, which, they had to look up on their little database, and it took about a month to read. And, I read it cover to cover, and the diagrams were just so creative, and I think one of the things about permaculture, which is so exciting, is if I go back to, say, some of the fields that I knew as a child when I lived in Wales, there were some potato, farmers that grew potatoes. And I went back there, a few years ago, maybe 40 years since I've been there. And they looked exactly the same. No, and on one level, that's very reassuring and it's wonderful. The potato field still looked like the potato field that I knew when I was in little shorts and running around with my mates. If I go back to a permaculture, even just a year later, it's different because it's evolving and it's growing, and they've found another way to put something else in. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that's quite extraordinary about permaculture, is it's about a really kind of living, evolving, dynamic process of working with nature to find ways to meet our many different needs, both, physical needs of kind of food, water, shelter, and our emotional needs for community and for love and support, and economic needs. It's practical, and what we're trying to do is kind of create systems which meet those needs in the smallest possible space. And the reason we're doing that is because if we can meet our needs in the smallest possible space, become quite humble as a species and maybe less demanding on the rest of the natural world, a lot more space for nature. At the moment, human beings are dominating the photosynthetic potential of the planet. We're saying, no, you can't have your plants. We want our plants. We want wheat. We want corn. We want, except X, Y, Z. And where we've got our big fields of crops, that means that there's not the rainforest that was there before, whether that's here or around the world. So if we can meet our needs on less land, then there's obviously much more space for nature. And ultimately, the best possible steward of natural systems is nature herself. No one does a better job than nature. But actually, indigenous people have got an incredibly good record as well. So tribal peoples, village scale, small scale communities. If you look at the highest biodiversity hotspots in the world, they're all managed by indigenous people. So essentially, if we want to have a living world, we need to stand in solidarity with indigenous people and really help to protect their rights and their land. And we need to take responsibility for meeting our own needs on the smallest amount of space possible, so that we can then actively restore and relinquish our claim to much of the land and give it back wild, really. And I think that combination of things really spoke to me as just a very sensible approach. And, I guess, what should I say? Maybe I should just say a little bit about what I do before I go too cosmic. I guess just quickly, my kind of cosmic view is like, it would be amazing to go up in spacecraft and visit the stars, but we haven't earned the right to do that yet because we haven't looked after this planet. If we're truly looking after this planet and we've got it all sorted, yeah, fine, let's have space stations and do all that, stuff. But until we've sorted out this planet, we really haven't got any right to go anywhere else. And so it's we've just got to get our priorities in order. For me, what I've been doing really since I guess I was 23 and did my first permaculture course in Bradford at Bradford University. I've been, an activist, involved in lots of projects. I did some training. I could probably jumped in too fast. I started sort of passing on my ignorance quite quickly. I look back and think, wow, what a brave person I must have been. I just dived in and shared what I knew. I mean, I think I was always honest and said, I'm only going to share what I know, and if I don't know it, I'll tell you I don't know it. And that did get me a long way. So I've done a lot of training. I've done lots and lots of workshops and intro courses and full design courses. So I'm definitely a permaculture trainer. I think that's decreased over time. I tend now to just do a course in Leeds once a year. I'm a really big, for me, a big focus needs to be on that kind of local relationship building. And we've been doing a course in Leeds since 2006. So I think we're on about our 14th course.
Wow. So
there's 200-300 people in Leeds that have done permaculture training, and lots of projects have emerged as a result of that. So I'm a permaculture trainer, but I guess really more than anything else, I'm an organizer. So I work for the Permaculture Association. I have done actually since 1999. And, my official job title is Chief Executive, because people kind of understand what that means. It means I'm willing to take responsibility for kind of difficult decisions. But on the whole, we work on a very kind of flat basis in the organisation.
Mm-hmm.
Just fantastic, because I'm in a positive, a network full of people doing things. Mm-hmm. So it's very life affirming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been involved in the rise of permaculture really from very early on in it, when people really had no clue what that word even meant, and or even very much around the concept of that, but there was searching for that, and then it came, and I think I remember when I was getting into permaculture years ago, I didn't know what it went. I didn't even know what it meant after I'd done the training, to be honest. So I had an idea of that all of the things that it included were important and mattered, and that was what mattered to me. That's what I was searching for and striving for, a framework and a community that brought all of the things that I felt mattered. People care, humans after all we are, but in balance and in relationship to everything else, the past, present and future, as well as the other living beings that exist right now. And I love that that permaculture brought that forwards. And now people do know what permaculture is. There's a lot of people. I mean, I'm sure that there's still plenty of people who've never heard of it before, but really it is a lot more mainstream.
It is, and I think in interesting ways as well. So there's the permaculture that people might hear about. There might be a Guardian article or Facebook posts or whatever it might be, and people see projects that are called permaculture. And then there's a lot of what you might call permaculture inspired activity, where people have done training, they've got that ethics, ecological principles, design thinking approach. They're doing permaculture, but they're not calling it permaculture. Mm-hmm. And for very good reasons. The word itself, for some people, it's exciting. For other people, it's maybe off-putting. So, words can be both a liberating and a barrier for people. And it's good to know, when to use terms and when not to. So there's a lot of really great work happening that's, I think, permaculture inspired. And it's interesting. I mean, I think if you look at the very first course in the UK was something like 1982. So really, I was sort of second wave. Right. So the first maybe 10 years was really pioneering work, very small numbers of people. And if you look at the curriculum of that first course, in 1982, it would have been totally radical, completely countercultural. This is when Margaret Thatcher was Falklands War. It was the big economic boom. It was Big Bang in the London Stock Exchange. It was capitalism, really going for it. It was Reagan and Thatcher basically saying, let's go neoliberal, or they're not saying it explicitly. It was this big change time. And permaculture's message was almost diametrically opposed to that. It was completely opposite end of the spectrum, so it was very countercultural. And what's fascinating now is that so much of what was on that agenda, on that curriculum then, is now in the mainstream. It's really this. I don't have to go on courses and explain what green roofs are, or why cycling is important, or why we need to have a circular economy, or there's some really big stuff. Is you look at, say, things like donut economics, which is big scale macroeconomic thinking by Kate Raworth. Kate's done a permaculture course. That's her version of permaculture economics.
Yes.
Now you've got whole cities like Amsterdam saying, "What's our donut plan for Amsterdam?"
So exciting! When I saw that article recently in response to the lockdown.
Yeah. Now I'm not for a minute just claiming that work for permaculture, but again, it's permaculture inspired.
Yes.
She's got the Earth Care, People Care, Fair Shares ethic is absolutely firmly within the donut model. And that is now being taken up at a city level all around the world.
Yes.
In fact, even at national level. So I think this is also, for me, one and really important thing to say in a sort of sense of humility is that it's not all about permaculture. Permaculture isn't the only group of people that believe or, that subscribe to kind of Earth Care, People Care, Fair Shares. It's a broader ethic that we're part of. We've articulated it, but there's lots of people that would subscribe to that approach. So, yeah, it's changing. And I think, in a sense, I saw a very brief video yesterday. It's talking about the rise of cultural creatives. And, it's a very large number of people now that really want quite a different sort of world. And I think permaculture is connecting with a lot of those people. So, the thing about permaculture, which is fascinating, is that on one level, it's a very, very practical approach. So, it'll help you think about what to do on an east-facing wall.
Yeah.
What kind of espalier fruit tree should I put there? Or even the idea of putting an espalier fruit tree there, and how would you do that? And what might you put as the underplanting? And what else could you put on the wall? And how would you make that all work well? Permaculture is very, very good at the practice. The actual systems of what you do at a very, very home or local level. But it also has this huge vision. Earth Care, People Care, Fair Shares future. Well, when people say, what's the alternative to capitalism? I think, well, maybe it's permaculture, or a permaculture-inspired future.
Yeah.
It's not that I want to be dogmatic and say everyone has to do permaculture, but it needs to be ethical. It needs to be ecological. They're kind of bottom lines, aren't they, really?
Yeah.
How can we not have an ecological society when we live in an ecological world? It has to be.
Yeah.
It almost feels like we've got this really unfair competitive advantage. We've got the sort of moral high ground and nature on our side.
Absolutely. And I feel like, for years, when I was first getting into permaculture myself, I think one of the easiest way to demonstrate it is in the garden and, designing and growing and thinking about things in that way. But what I also saw, as I got more into it, was how applicable it was to all areas of life. So you could design your business, you could design the way your home and how you live inside the house, and you can design the way you plan your year in relation to permaculture, and it's really about principles and the ethics and living well and living in a way that makes sense, so that you can do what you need to do efficiently and with care, and taking into account your own personal needs as well. And, what kind of maps or structures or design tools are available in other fields that allow for yourself and allow for people care. I don't know. I mean, as you say, there are many things now, but at the time it felt really revolutionary and exciting to put equal weighting on people care and fair share and all of those things. And absolutely is what we need. It has been what we've always needed, but it's.
And I think one of the things that goes with that is it's about our own agency. So it's what can I do? What can we do in this family? What can we do on this street? It's not kind of campaigning against something else. It's not campaigning to kind of persuade someone else to do something. It's saying, what can I do? And that's incredibly liberating because it puts you in the space of building your own sense of power and agency. And I think, it's more exciting than trying to get other people to do things differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to get myself to do something differently is much more. It can be actually more challenging sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's achievable.
But then what happens is when you do live differently, you are perceived differently, and all of a sudden people want some of that. And it's absolutely the best way of drawing people in and creating the ripples that are lasting and actually work in the long term. So yeah, that's exciting. And so you've noticed that it's becoming more mainstream. People are hearing about it more. What does that actually look like on the ground? What does the Permaculture Association do, and how big is it becoming, or how well known, or what's out there in terms of permaculture programs, projects?
Great. So there's a big, broad network of kind of. I mean, I guess you can see permaculture out there at a number of different levels. So what's out there? Well, on one level, there's a whole load of amazing people, and like me, just ordinary people, but people that have decided that they're going to do something, whatever it is, and I think it's a network. So there's a network out there, and that network is doing extraordinary things, really. And the network is in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, every country in Europe, and actually most countries around the world. So not all, but I think our probably most recent assessment was there's certainly some sort of strategic permaculture organisation in about 125, 130 countries.
Wow.
There are projects and individuals in probably another 30 or 40. So we're not far from being in every country, and permaculture isn't nationalistic as such. So in terms of the spread, we're a very broad-based global movement, and it's not dominated by the global north or the global south. It's actually one of the very few global movements which is equally well established in both the global north and global south. There's an amazing network of people. Those people are one of the kind of the slogans in permaculture is start at the back door. So the next step in terms of what's out there is those people are then doing the things that they can do straight away every day in their own homes and gardens. So there's an incredible number of beautiful homes and gardens, very creative, whether it's a canal boat that's got incredible moorings, and, a friend of mine in Huddersfield has created a canal boat it's been done out so that it's really good for disability. It's a shared thing. They've got the solar. It's got electric motor. It's a permaculture designed canal boat. I've got designed Victorian terraced gardens and houses. You've got new build that's been created. Straw bale, adobe. Many different green building techniques, and retrofit activities. So you've got houses and gardens which are really energy efficient, either because they've been designed and built that way or because they've been retrofitted to become that. So my house is way warmer than it was when I bought it. With really fairly straightforward modifications. But I've done that consistently over the last 20 years, and I've got a really comfortable house now. So those people are putting it into practice in their own lives, and that means we've got these amazing homes, gardens, But then beyond that, they're also in relationship with their communities. And that then tends to create a whole host of kind of, I guess you could say, social and economic activity. So that might be car clubs. So I don't own a vehicle. I haven't owned a vehicle for about more than 10 years. But I'm in a car share, and that we've got four vehicles in the car share. There's about 16 families in that. We share those vehicles. We've all got very low car use, but we've all got access to one when we need one. So that's a kind of, in part, part of my permaculture design for my transport is part of that community approach to delivering our collective transport needs. You've got community-supported agriculture schemes, so lots of community-based food growing. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things that people will see in the network. It's harder to be invited to everybody's home, but it's much easier to go and see the project in the community. So I guess the next level out of that household activity is then the work that we do in community. So, the hundreds of forest gardens, community-supported agriculture schemes, connections between, so a lot of food-orientated work, but also I think a significant amount of work around kind of new economy, solidarity economy style work. So that's been happening partly through things like Transition Towns Network, partly inspired by things like the Reconomy Project. So yeah, I think quite a lot of work around new economy. What else is there? I guess people have been delivering energy projects. So some of the early solar energy companies, one or two of those were set up by people inspired by permaculture. So a big, less so in this country actually, because I think that the support for renewables has been much more intermittent and challenging from the government. So it's not picked quite the same way, but there's certainly energy projects out there. And then I think one of the kind of categories of project which I think is most, for me, really inspiring is where you kind of go along and you see the project, and you might see the garden or see the forest garden or whatever it might be, the actual physical space. But actually, it's all about people. So there's a really inspiring project which I was going to go and see, but because of lockdown, I haven't actually been able to visit yet, called Solhaven Farm. And there's a really, it's in Kettering in Northamptonshire. And basically the two people that founded that had a really hard time in their lives, so I'm not sure how much I should say about that, but they've gone through their own challenges. And then they came across permaculture and they put it into practice, built up their confidence and their skills. Now they're running a little micro farm called Solhaven Farm. And that farm connects with people that are homeless, that have gone through all sorts of different drug addiction, that have had, different problems and challenges in their lives. And they have created a space where those people can plant a seed, they can tend those new plants, and they take it all the way through to a point where they're eating the food. And it's such a life-affirming process, and it really helps people to kind of get themselves back on track. So I think there's a really fantastic category of projects out there where, you can go and see the actual physical side, which really is about relationships. Really it's about the people care side of that work. That if I extend out to the wider world, then, I can tell you about the communities in El Salvador or in Kenya or India where, whole communities are being really transformed by their kind of collective work to create food gardens, forest gardens, to create systems which are more resilient to climate change or drought, flooding, tackling people's real issues of poverty.
It's like, this is the work that we need. It absolutely is the way that we should be living. And it feels to me like what it does is it gives people the permission and the tools and the language to be able to put all of our needs, to be able to trust that humanity is good and that we can be sustainable. And through all of those things, it filters into every part of our life.
Yeah.
When I did the Earth activist training, I was a young, very green activist, very nervous about being accepted onto that quite hard to get onto training at the time. I remember there was something like 100 and odd applications or something, and I got on and was with loads of, in inverted commas, activists and people who were doing projects and exciting things, and it just totally blew me away. It was intense and it was magical and it was practical, and it was in a place at Land Matters which, what they'd overcome to be able to create an intentional community in the way that they'd done was just incredible. And then bringing Starhawk, obviously, over from America, and then with yourself and then all of the others who'd been doing the Earth activist training for a few years. It was just an incredible time for me and absolutely filtered into every part of my life. And I have dabbled in leading introductions to permaculture over the years. I've done various workshops, and my focus, having come from a social work background, was the people care element of that, and still is. But as you've said it, I've noticed that actually I do go from one month to the next, sometimes even probably there's been years where I hardly mention permaculture, but it's just fundamentally how I live, and knowing that there is a framework for these things and that it's out there has inspired me and kept me on the right path, actually, to always going back to, is what I'm doing now good for me and then for my community? Is it good for and going to have a positive impact on the natural environment around us? And am I only taking what I need and not more? And just having those ethics and all of the much more depth that there is in permaculture that infiltrates into everything is just powerful. And to hear what you just went through with all of these projects around the world, I mean, wow.
Yeah, that's amazing.
How exciting.
Really is.
How exciting. And now we're in this present time. So it's 2020. We've been in lockdown in the UK for a couple of months now. And it's an unprecedented time in history. It's nobody could have ever predicted it, and we don't really know what's going to happen next. But we did know that something was going to happen at some point, because the way that we've been living is and has been unsustainable for a long time, unhealthy and disconnected. So, I wonder what permaculture has for us now, apart from everything.
What does permaculture have for us now? I guess the future is not yet written. If someone was to write the current world situation into a science fiction novel, you would hardly believe it. Yeah. It couldn't be any crazier. But the wonderful thing is that we're all writing it together. And I think that we often live by someone else's script. And I think there's a really interesting opportunity now to tell a different story. I've read Sapiens recently, and very interesting book. And really, what he's saying is that ultimately we're storytelling creatures. That's what makes us different to every other species, is we create this capacity to tell quite abstract stories. So even other species can lie. So a monkey might say, "Oh, there's a lion coming," but all the other monkeys run away and then they'll go and grab all the bananas. But there's no monkeys will say, "Well, there's a lion king on the hill and he made me the god and you've got the king and you've all got to bow down to me." We're the only ones that tell those kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. And really, what we're discovering with COVID-19, or what a lot of people are discovering for the first time maybe, is a lot of our stories just aren't working. Mm. And so there's an opportunity now to create a different sort of story. And, what has permaculture got on offer for us? Well, earth care, people care, fair shares. It really, in some ways, is that straightforward. we can create a story about the world where we care for the earth, where we care for each other, and where we share our resources fairly between ourselves, between nations, and between our species and the rest of the living world. And what's fantastic is that for every conceivable aspect of that new story, there are practices, there are approaches, techniques, technologies, networks that know how to get it done. Mm-hmm. So we have increasingly got the know-how. So we've got the know-how to create an electrical energy system around the world that we could meet the majority of people's needs, modest needs, without the use of fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. We know that. That's now absolutely, a Finnish group of scientists have put together a report. Not only can we do it, it's cheaper and way less polluting than carrying on with our existing system. So there's no reason anymore to have anything other than a renewable energy system. Transport, we know that we can convert roads or parts of roads to cycling lanes. Right? Cities around the world are starting to do that. So wherever you live, we can be campaigning for cycling lanes. We can shift our transport system. We can shift our energy system. We can say, well, actually, if it was possible to house the homeless during COVID-19, then it's not beyond our capability to house them after COVID-19.
Yeah.
So what are the new kinds of housing mechanisms or approaches that we could adopt, which would mean that everybody in the country could have access to affordable housing? Well, there's co-housing projects, there's workers' housing cooperatives. We've got the models. They're choices that we can make. So I think in some sense, one of the things that I would really encourage anybody that listens to this to do is to kind of, where's an area that you feel passionate about? Where's an area that you care about? I don't just mean a geographical area, but maybe, obviously your place, but also maybe you're passionate about transport or the economy or something like that. Have a look at what the methods are for this new story. Who else is doing that kind of work? How can you connect in with that? How can you expand that work? In the Permaculture Association, I didn't really say much about what we do, but if you go to permaculture.org.uk, we've actually got a number of different sites. So the Scottish permaculture site, the Welsh permaculture site, we've got a knowledge base. In that knowledge base, we've got like 150 different areas of practical solutions, from transport to forest gardens to soil care to, education processes. It's all there, really. It's not all there, but there's a significant amount there.
Yeah.
So really, in some ways, quite fundamentally, I think what COVID-19 does is it gives us an opportunity to say, we're not happy with the old story. We want a new story, or let's say an upgraded story. We need to modify the stories to make sure that we move from a world which is really about profit before people and planet. Categorically, you can say very, very clearly that our current economic system is about putting profit first. Mm-hmm. And that's not good enough anymore. It never was good enough. Mm-hmm. But I think now there's enough people to say, no, we want a story which is about an economy which puts people and planet first. That can absolutely make economic sense. Mm-hmm. Of course it does, because economy is about the good stewardship of our resources. That's what an economist does. Mm-hmm. Someone who's a good economist looks after their resources well. Mm-hmm. So let's look after people and planet. They're our ultimate resources, although I don't like to call them resources that much. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's that new story, and then we can build our own agency. So yes, sign for petitions on the Green New Deal and sign petitions for this, that, and the other. But what can you do? Mm. What can you do with your friends, with your family, with your community? Where's the energy in your network? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Pile in there. Give it some support. We need more activists.
Absolutely. I mean, this is it, isn't it? It's like the things that we thought would never happen have happened. good and bad. You know, obviously there's a lot of people who are in fear and are lost. I guess there's a process of letting go to that which we knew, because we hold on to the things that we know, don't we? And that's our familiar, and we think that's the way life is. And as they fall away, there's this space that's created, and it opens up. And if we can do that, if we can give ourselves the space to grieve what we've lost, to let go, or not grieve, you know, there's plenty of stuff to celebrate now, then we can create a new way of being. And just as we always have, you know, reinvent. You know, we're an ingenious species, and we adapt, and adaptation is crucial.
It is. And I think that, like you say, I mean, back to the kind of learning is not knowing, to a certain extent, for a lot of people, there is this, I don't know what to do next. But so maybe it's okay. There's some learning to do here, but there's lots of people that can help. And yeah, I just guess, actually, I think I've just lost my train of thought there a bit, but yeah.
Well, I mean, but what's exciting and interesting for me, like you say, is that for the first time, people can't go all over the place in their cars and travel to work, and they have lots of time at home, and they're forced to spend times in their gardens. And actually, probably there'll be some, you know, we'll have the best gardens that we've ever had in this country. Right. And that's where it begins, isn't it? It begins at home, and in growing food. I'm growing food for the first time in a few years, actually. And, you know, although I'm not under any illusion that I'm going to be able to grow enough food to actually sustain myself, I'm learning, and it feels like we have that. It's just so healthy to have your hands in the soil.
Yeah, that's right. It is. And I think that one of the things that's important to say is that COVID-19 has been, for people in the West, this is a kind of a big wake-up call. But it wasn't that long ago that we were really worried about the flooding that was happening all over the country.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that long ago that we were worrying about 30,000 deaths from heat waves in Europe.
Yeah.
None of that has gone away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if this is a jolt into action to say, okay, there's all the positives about permaculture. I got into permaculture because basically it's looked like such a positive alternative and positive future. And increasingly I see it as one of our best possible kind of rescue plans. You know, we are in a very difficult situation with climate change, and, you know, the collapse of many natural systems and biodiversity. And I hope this is a wake-up call for people to say, you know, we can change, but it's important that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can help increase our household and our community sort of resilience, our food growing systems, our mutual solidarity networks, that puts us in really good stead for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm very aware that there are many communities in this country that are really suffering at the moment. You know, social inequality is leaving a lot of people hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got no money, not a penny, not 2 pennies to rub together. And so there's some really urgent action, I think, to build that, to create a much more inclusive, diverse, ecological economy at the local level. But and the inclusive being so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, the thing for me is the change in consumption. You know, if we've managed to live without buying new clothes and shoes for 2 months, how much longer could we actually manage to live without buying new clothes and shoes? And therefore, how much less money do we actually need to make? And what if we were working less? You know, generally, if we go back, you know, we still do need things. We will need things. But what if we worked less and spent more time doing the things that mattered to us and that made us feel connected, because we spend less and we consume less? And then, but I'm not an economist, and I'm not someone who understands the job market and how that all works. I know that it's all propped up and isn't essentially working. If we were in a real capitalist society, a lot of the things that currently exist, our banks and whatnot, would have failed and been allowed to fall flat on their faces. So yeah, I often wonder, do we need to be impacting and making those decision makers at the top act and think with a permaculture mindset, or is it only going to come from the ground up?
I think it can come from everywhere. In terms of change making, one of the permaculture principles is use and value diversity. And, in terms of change making, there are the people that work really, really hard as campaigners to make sure that the new agriculture bill has got agroecological farming written in, or, the change in sentence 3.2.4. And those campaigners and those policymakers, policy change makers, they do play a role. I don't think we're ready to get rid of the state completely at this point. There are things that the government can do for us, and we need to hold it to account, and we need to make sure that the policies are sound. So we do need those policy change people, and we need the people. I think permaculture is primarily in the kind of build the alternative form of change making. So let's create the future we want and lead by example and demonstrate what's possible. And then you get the change makers that say, hey, you know what? If we block the road or block the bridge, they're going to have to take notice.
Mm-hmm.
There's Extinction Rebellion and CND and the people that are doing all that fantastic work on the streets. Mm-hmm. That's really important as well. And I think that at the moment we need all the change makers we can get. Yeah. The thing that we need is that shared story of what we're trying to achieve together.
Yeah.
And we need to be really working strategically together.
Yeah.
So, the policy makers don't just, the policy, the people that are trying to shift policy, don't just kind of pass on your own ideas. Go and check out what's happening in the people that are building the alternative. What do they really need?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, make sure that your policy changes are really rooted in the stuff that people need. And then, the people that are protesting on the streets, make sure that when you're doing that, you're pointing out to people what policy shifts are needed and what are the practical alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
So,
are we in the Great Turning?
Well, it's
mm-hmm.
It has to be.
I love what you're saying, and that speaks to the work of Joanna Macy, who talks about how we need people who are doing the holding actions. Yeah. We need people who are creating the alternative and the shift of consciousness, so that we're all on board with moving forwards in a good way together. And that's the opportunity in this opportunity. And we've never really fully had that before.
No, and well, maybe we have. I don't know. I think that the thing for me, I keep coming back to is it's about recognizing our own agency, and that could be as individuals or families or communities, groups. I think there's a lot happens when we make changes ourselves. It gives us quite a lot of confidence. There's a lot we can do for ourselves. And then when we notice the other people that are doing stuff for themselves and we group together, then we can create kind of mutual support and learning between those groups. And then we can actually start connecting with the policy people to say, there's something really interesting happening here.
Mm.
And, like say with the agriculture bill, it's a reasonable prospect that agroecology will be in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because great work from Land Workers Alliance and Sustain and other people that have been doing a lot of lobbying, and their work has rests on the fact that people have actually shown that it's possible to create agroecological farming systems,
mm-hmm.
like permaculture and so on. So organics and the like. So it all fits together. But I really feel like it's a really important time to be putting the practical things into our lives, whether that's thinking about our own gardens or our community gardens or how we can reduce our energy footprint. That's one aspect. Mm-hmm. And then the other aspect is, and who can I connect with in my network that means that we can build that kind of next level up.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Andy, because it's exciting. It's always been exciting hearing about permaculture, and I've always enjoyed hearing you telling about permaculture because you do it so well with so much passion and enthusiasm, and live it. It's about living it, which is what you've just said. It's about living and breathing this as your reality. And then when you do that, when you have made those changes and you're not just trying and you're not fighting against the system because you've done it, you've made those changes in your life, then you're living it. And we're all moving towards a change that can become our local and global reality, which hopefully is a world that is more connected and in balance than what it is now.
Absolutely. Nothing I've proposed is illegal.
Yeah.
Do is give ourselves permission.
Yeah.
Make them think.
So where do people go? If people, the problem is that we don't get taught this in schools. So when people do want to live differently, but they don't really know what to do, where do they go? What do we,
So lots and lots of different things that people could do. In terms of schooling, I think probably our schooling didn't include much, but it is shifting. Certainly in Scotland, they've got a much more focus on outdoor learning. We've got a Children in Permaculture project. And if you just Google Children in Permaculture, you can find kind of 400 different activities and sort of suggestions for how you can work with kids, either in school or homeschooling or home settings. Really, going out and using the park or the local woods. That's going to be, really important that in these times, I think, for kids to be able to get out and play and to do that play in a kind of thoughtful way and learn about nature and how they can relate to each other and to nature. So there's Children in Permaculture. That would be one Google search, I would suggest. If you go to the permaculture, permaculture.org.uk, I think that the three buttons say something like Learn, Join, Connect. And if you click on the Learn one there, then you'll find courses listed. We're developing a Design for Resilience Foundations in Permaculture course. That's going to be online very soon. So, even in the lockdown, it'll be very possible to do that. There are other online courses. We're going to do that in a blended way, so you'll be able to connect in with local groups through that course. There's so lots of learning opportunities. Our knowledge base gives you kind of lots of information if you're looking for a particular topic. In the Connect button, you'll find a list of the kind of projects that you can go and visit. And at the moment, we've got a project to really update that and make sure that we've got a lot more of the projects that we know are out there on that list. So over the next couple of months, that's going to be growing and growing and growing. So, if you have a look at the list of network of what's called the Land Network, you can find projects near you. You can join, the Permaculture Association Facebook group. Find us on Instagram, on Twitter. It's all your stuff, really. I think if you've listened to this and you're interested in permaculture, type it into your search engine, find out what's near you, join the Permaculture Association, do some learning, and I guess find something quite quickly that you can do. I think I would suggest that. We've got top 10 books that we recommend, so you could get a book, read that, and pick a project. The project might be, okay, well, get ready for the winter. I'm going to do some home insulation. Or it could be that I'm going to go out for walks in nature and I'm going to pick nettles and wild mustard and wild garlic and ground elder, and I'm going to make some wild pesto. That's fun. That's good.
I've been doing a lot of that. Yeah.
Push your boundary. Do something. Yeah. Do something that might give you some joy, and then learn a bit more about permaculture, and then do something else that will give you some joy, and talk to people about it, and it'll come. Steps.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy. It's been really lovely to connect with you again. It's really nice to actually journey with you as well through from the beginning of the history of permaculture and your journey with it as well, because you really have been doing it for a very long time now. And so I feel very honoured to have you here.
Thank you so much.
pleasure. And maybe we can speak again, because I think what we've done here is done a really nice sort of introduction to permaculture, but we could definitely go further in, couldn't we?
I'd be happy to do that.
Lovely. Cool. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope it inspires you to follow your path of deep connection. I love sharing this information so much, and I'll always share any relevant links in my show notes. If you like the show, please consider supporting it at patreon.com/Connection Matters Podcast. This is where you'll find bonus episodes, giveaways, and behind-the-scenes content from me, as well as having my huge heartfelt thanks for any support that you can give me. It really helps with the viability of the show. You can get most of what will be on offer for as little as £3 per month. Please also subscribe on whatever app you use by clicking that little subscribe button below. That way you'll get all of the upcoming episodes straight into your device. And please leave a review on iTunes. It's so helpful to our ratings. The music that opens and closes the show is actually by my very own dad, Ray Johnson. Thanks, Dad. And you can hear more of his music at soundcloud.com/VisionRay.